The sun hung low over the weathered fence posts, casting long shadows across the dusty ranch yard, where Samuel Morrison had worked the land for more than 30 years. His calloused hands knew every gate latch, every loose board in the barn, every sound his cattle made when they were content or troubled. On this particular afternoon, as he led his chestnut mare back from checking the north pasture, something caught his eye near the old water trough. A figure hunched against the wooden planks, looking smaller and more fragile than anything belonged in this harsh landscape. Samuel slowed his steps, his weathered boots making soft sounds in the dirt as he approached. The person was a young woman, maybe 25, with tangled hair that caught, the golden light and clothes that had seen better days. Her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold the world at bay. "Don't touch me," she whispered when she heard his footsteps, her voice carrying a tremor that spoke of recent pain. Samuel stopped where he was, his hand still holding the mare's reins. He had learned in his 58 years that some hurts ran deeper than what showed on the surface, and that rushing towards someone in pain often pushed them further away. "I won't," he said simply, his voice carrying the same gentle tone he used with spooked horses. "I'm Samuel Morrison, and this is my land, but you're welcome to rest here as long as you need." The woman looked up then, and he could see the purple bruise spreading, along her cheekbone the split lip that hadn't quite healed. Her eyes held a wariness that reminded him of wild animals who had been cornered too many times. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she admitted, the words coming out like they cost her something precious. Samuel nodded slowly, understanding more than she probably realized. He had seen that look before in his own mirror during the dark months after his wife Margaret had passed, the feeling of being utterly alone in a world that suddenly seemed too big and too cold. "There's a small cabin about a quarter-mile up that hill," he said, pointing toward a cluster of cottonwood trees. "Haven't used it in years, but it's got a roof and walls and a wood stove that still works." "I can't pay you," she said quickly. "Didn't ask you to." Samuel turned his attention to his horse, running his hand along her neck while the woman seemed to consider his offer. The mare nickered softly, and he smiled, remembering how Margaret used to say that animals always knew who could be trusted. "My name is Sarah," the woman said finally. "Sarah Mitchell. Well, Sarah Mitchell, you look like you could use a hot meal and a safe place to sleep." He gestured toward the main house, a modest 2-story building with a wraparound porch that Margaret had insisted on when they first built it. "Kitchen's got coffee on, and I was about to fix some supper." Sarah shook her head quickly. "I don't want to be any trouble." "No trouble at all," Samuel said. "Been cooking for 1 for 3 years now, and I always make too much." He paused, letting that sink in. "Besides, my wife always said that kindness shared comes back threefold. Though I figured doing right by folks doesn't need a reason." Something in his tone must have reached her, because Sarah's shoulders relaxed just a fraction. She stood slowly, wincing as if movement caused pain beyond what showed on her face. Samuel pretended not to notice, but he did see how she favored her left side and the way she moved like someone who had learned to expect sudden violence. "The cabin's got basics," he said as they walked slowly toward the house. "Bed blankets, a few dishes. I'll clean it up, pay you back somehow." "Sarah." Samuel stopped walking and waited until she looked at him. "Sometimes life knocks us down and we need help getting back up. That's not charity, that's just being human." They reached the porch steps and Samuel gestured to one of the wooden rockers. "Why don't you sit for a minute while I get us some food?" Sarah hesitated, then sank into the chair like her legs couldn't hold her up anymore. Samuel tied his horse to the porch rail and disappeared into the house. Through the screen door, Sarah could hear him moving around the kitchen, the homey sounds of plates clinking and something sizzling in a pan. The ranch spread out before her in the dying light, acres of pasture dotted with cattle and horses. It felt peaceful in a way she had almost forgotten existed, when Samuel returned carrying a tray with 2 bowls and a plate of cornbread. Sarah's stomach growled despite herself. "Haven't eaten much lately," she admitted. "Figured as much," Samuel said, settling into the other rocker. The stew was simple beef and vegetables, but it tasted better than anything Sarah had eaten in weeks. They ate in comfortable silence, listening to the evening sounds of the ranch cattle lowing in the distance, the soft whinny of horses, the rustle of wind through the cottonwoods. "This is good," Sarah said finally. "Margaret's recipe." Samuel replied, "She always said food tastes better when it's shared with good company. Is Margaret your wife?" Samuel's voice was gentle, but Sarah caught the underlying sadness. "Cancer took her 3 years ago come October." "I'm sorry," Samuel nodded, accepting her sympathy. "She was a good woman, believed in taking care of folks who needed help. Would have liked you, I think." After supper, Samuel showed Sarah to the cabin carrying her small backpack and a lantern to light the way. The little building sat tucked among the trees with a view of the valley below. Inside it was simple but clean, with an iron bed frame covered by one of Margaret's quilts, a small table and 2 chairs, and a pot-bellied stove. "Firewood stacked outside," Samuel said, lighting. "The stove gets cold out here at night, even in summer." Sarah stood in the doorway watching flames catch in the stove's belly. The warm light made the cabin feel like a home, rather than just a shelter. "Why are you helping me?" she asked suddenly. Samuel straightened up, brushing dust from his hands. "Because you need help and I can give it. Doesn't seem more complicated than that to me." Sarah wrapped her arms around herself again, but this time it looked more like she was holding on to something good, rather than protecting herself from something bad most people would have called the sheriff. "You done something that requires the sheriff?" Sarah shook her head. "Then we're good." Over the following days, a routine developed between them. Samuel would check on Sarah each morning, bringing fresh coffee and whatever breakfast he had made. She began helping with small tasks around the ranch, mending fence, cleaning stalls, feeding the chickens. Her movements gradually became less guarded, though she still startled at sudden sounds. Sarah discovered she had a way with the horses, especially the younger ones who seemed to sense her gentleness, despite her own wounds. Samuel watched her work with the animals and saw something Margaret would have recognized. Natural kindness that hadn't been destroyed by whatever had brought Sarah to his ranch one evening. About a week after her arrival, Sarah joined Samuel on the porch for supper. The bruise on her face had faded to yellow and green, and she moved with less pain. "Tell me about Margaret," Sarah said as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Samuel smiled, the kind of smile that came from good memories. "Met her at a church social when I was barely 20. She was the prettiest thing I'd ever seen, but that wasn't what got me. It was how she talked to my grandmother, treated her like she was the most interesting person in the room. Took me 6 months to work up the courage to ask her to walk with me." Sarah listened as Samuel talked about their life together, how Margaret had loved this land almost as much as he did, how she had turned their house into a home with flowers and laughter, and Sunday dinners that went on for hours, how she had never been able to have children but had loved every stray animal and lost soul that found its way to their ranch. "Sounds like she was special." "She was that," Samuel agreed. "Always said that kindness was the most important thing a person could have, more valuable than money or looks or even smarts." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I was married," she said finally, "to a man who said he loved me but had a funny way of showing it." Samuel didn't push, didn't ask questions, just waited, started small, little criticisms about my cooking or how I dressed. Then it got bigger. Her hand went unconsciously to her ribs where Samuel suspected there were bruises he couldn't see. "One night he came home angry about something at work and I said the wrong thing." Sarah's voice got very small. "I finally understood that it wasn't going to get better. So I left, took what I could carry and just started driving. Car broke down about 10 miles from here. Walking's not easy when everything hurts." Samuel felt a familiar anger rise in his chest, not at Sarah, but at the kind of man who would hurt someone so obviously gentle. He had seen his share of such men over the years and had never understood how they could sleep at night. "You're safe now," he said simply, "as long as you want to stay." Sarah looked at him with something like wonder. "You don't even know me." "Know enough," Samuel replied. "Know you're kind to animals and you work hard and you don't complain even when you're hurting. Know you say please and thank you and you wash your dishes after meals. That's plenty to know about a person's character." The weeks that followed brought a gradual healing. Sarah's physical wounds faded, and her natural warmth began to emerge. She laughed at Samuel's stories about stubborn cattle and impossible weather. She helped him repair the henhouse and plant Margaret's vegetable garden, which had been neglected since her death. Samuel found himself looking forward to their evening conversations on the porch. Sarah had opinions about books and music and politics. She told him stories about growing up in a small town in Kansas where everyone knew everyone else's business, but still looked out for each other. She had,